So the new Bond film, Skyfall, has just come out. A film that I was very much looking forward to, despite really having no time for Quantum of Solace, which was the second and last Daniel Craig James Bond movie. Now, Skyfall has come about, I believe it's been delayed by a couple of years because of the financial troubles of MGM, but it's finally been released now to coincide with the 50-year anniversary of James Bond, or rather the cinematic universe of James Bond. Now, it's directed by Sam Mendes, who you may know from American Beauty, Road to Perdition, Away We Go, Revolutionary Road. He's come and taken over the reins as director. It's his first, not only his first Bond film, but his first action film. And this was one of the reasons I was both excited and a little bit worried about this movie. I was excited because I love Sam Mendes. I love American Beauty, and Road to Perdition I think is an absolutely brilliant movie. I love him as a director. I certainly love his style, but I was a little bit worried because he's never done action before about how he would direct action. The reason being is Quantum of Solace by Mark Forster, that was his first action movie, and the action in that film was not shot or directed particularly well, so I was worried that maybe we'd have the same problem with Sam Mendes. But I just want to say now, quick capture review, it's brilliant, this movie. It's not only a great Bond film, not only one of the best Bond movies, it's also just a great action movie in general, and certainly one of the better blockbusters that has been released this year. Now, the film itself, not to give too much away, because it's only been out about a week or so, I believe, so I don't want to give away any of the plot. But it basically follows James Bond, who works for Judi Dench's character M in MI6. She inadvertently loses a list of secret agents' identities, which is posted on YouTube of all things, and this brings about a series of events in which James Bond gets involved and has to get this list back and find out who it is who's obtained it and posted it on the internet. So that's a very sort of basic outline of the plot. To give any more away than that would be to do a disservice to the film. But essentially it is a MacGuffin movie, and all James Bond movies are, I believe this has already been acknowledged by a good friend of mine here on YouTube, Sam, the Lucha Media Geek, who put his review up of this movie. All James Bond films are MacGuffin movies, and this is no exception. However, there is so much more to this movie than your average action film or chase movie or MacGuffin film, in that it's a very multi-layered blockbuster and action film. Now, as good and intriguing as the plot is, why I think this film exceeds is that it's got a certain theme to it, or rather themes, plural, and really proves to be one of the more interesting Bond movies. Now, it looks at how this lifestyle can affect James Bond. At one point, the villain, played brilliantly by Javier Bardem from No Country for Old Men, you know, he says to James Bond, you know, you try to hide behind all your pills and alcohol and things like that. Now, it's a very interesting look at James Bond as a person, as a human being, and what sort of toll this lifestyle would take on a person. And it also hints, and this is something that I believe was acknowledged by Mark Commode when he reviewed this movie. Essentially, the two main characters in this, James Bond and the villain played by Javier Bardem, both have mother issues. It spends a little bit of time going into James Bond's backstory about being an orphan and having absentee parents, and perhaps he imprints a certain aspect of parenthood onto Judi Dench's character M, and this is why he becomes so involved with her. It's very interesting. It takes a deeper look and goes a lot further into the mythos of the James Bond character than the previous films have, and to be honest, it's probably the most interesting look at James Bond since On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which was probably the first Bond film to really take that sort of more character-driven approach to one of these movies. So I found all that stuff really interesting. Daniel Craig is consistently brilliant as Bond. I know that he gets kind of a bad rap for some reason, but I love Daniel Craig as Bond. I think he's on a par as my favourite Bond, along with Timothy Dalton. I do love Daniel Craig as Bond. I think he brings not only a certain kind of gruff, gritty and edginess to the role, because he actually looks like he could do what James Bond does. but he brings a certain human element that is hinted at, as I mentioned earlier. So it's a very kind of multi-layered performance. Javier Bardem as the Bond villain is brilliant. Javier Bardem, consistently brilliant in any movie that he stars in. Manages to play the supervillain, but in a very realistic way. He has his own island, but they manage to make that sort of realistic in this James Bond universe. You know, he doesn't have his face carved into the side of a volcano, but he has his own island. How he obtained it, which they explain, is something that you can kind of imagine happening. So it's not so outlandish that it's outside the realm of possibility, which is why I quite like this take on Bond, because it is supposed to be sort of a realistic modern day Bond. But it does kind of have an outlandish streak in it, but nothing too extreme. And as well as that, it is full of references and sort of nudge nudge wink winks to the camera in terms of referencing the older Bond films and what's come before. It's very aware of its DNA, let's put it that way. And Sam Mendes is clearly a fan of the Bond franchise, because there are so many references to previous Bond films that you'll lose count. But it doesn't feel like it's distracting at all. It doesn't take you out of the movie. It's actually quite endearing, and you know, you feel like you're watching something made by somebody who genuinely loves what they're doing. And I think it's sort of an infectious enthusiasm that runs throughout the film. It's shot by Roger Deakins, who is the award-winning cinematographer. He shot most of the Coen brothers movies, and the film looks absolutely beautiful. Literally, you could pause this at any moment and you will have an oil painting. The composition of every shot is gorgeous. The standout moment of how well this film is shot is a fight scene that takes place in silhouette against a colourful neon backdrop, which is just unbelievably handsome. I think really what makes this film succeed is it's a Bond movie made by proper filmmakers, and I hope that comment makes sense. But essentially, Sam Mendes and Roger Deakins have worked on Oscar-winning movies, or Oscar-winning films, and they bring a certain sensibility to this that really, you know, it's very rare you see it in a Bond movie. But it does certainly make it all the more rewarding. Thomas Newman, who has worked with Sam Mendes many times, has scored the film. And this is probably my favourite element of the movie, is the score. The reason being is it's distinctly Thomas Newman. Like, if you didn't know who had done the music to this movie, you'd be able to figure it out within 5 minutes. It's a distinctly Thomas Newman score, and it has that certain sort of very identifiable sensibility to it. But also it weaves into that the themes of Bond that we're used to. So you'll have Thomas Newman's score running, and then when there's a punch the air moment, the Bond theme will kick in, and he puts his own twist on the Bond theme as well, and it's brilliant. The score is ever present throughout the movie, and it's fantastic. It's probably one of the best Bond scores I think there has ever been, because he manages to put his own personal stamp on it while keeping what the fans want and what the fans will recognise, and ends up managing to weave together a very unique Bond score. So the score in this movie is one of the strongest elements, and as I said, it's beautifully shot. Sam Mendes handles the direction of the action very well. The action is very kinetic, it escalates, action scenes build and build and build, and the film starts with a massive action scene that we've seen in the trailers. It's a fight scene on top of a train. That's in the trailer, so that's not a spoiler. The end of this movie, in the third act, with a sort of, yes, it's full of action, but it's a little bit more understated, and I think that's a very wise move by Sam Mendes, not to try and outdo the opening scene at the end. You know, they let the characters breathe towards the end of the movie, and I think it's all the more powerful for it, the ending. We also have a new character of Q coming in. I don't know the actor's name, but I thought he was great as Q. Maybe a little bit too geek chic, but I still thought the actor was great. Ray Fiennes is in this as a character called Mallory, essentially a bureaucrat who is actually looking out for M and Bond. So I really enjoyed Ray Fiennes' character. I can't sing the praises of this movie enough. It's essentially a great spy action movie, but with certain human elements, and thematically it's very interesting as well, about mother issues and absentee parents and all the rest of it, and childhood trauma, and also, you know, what can cause a man to become a misogynist, essentially. And while it doesn't, you know, I don't want to sound like all this weighs the film down, because it doesn't. It's a very kind of easygoing, breezy action movie, very pacey. You won't be bored at any moment, but it certainly hints and layers the script a little bit more than you would expect from a movie like this. So I thought it was brilliant. They use in the action scenes as well largely special effects. I think there's very minimal use of CGI in this, at least from what I could tell. Most of the effects are practical, and you know, it goes to show at the end of the movie when the credits roll and you've got a list of stunt people about this long going down the screen. You know, that is what you want to see at the end of it, an action movie. You know, you don't want to be kind of bombarded with computer-generated imagery. You know, the fact that stunt people actually put themselves at risk for our entertainment is great. It's got that old-fashioned movie magic feel to it, and the action scenes are all the more sort of powerful for it. The action in this is pretty brilliant, and also a large portion of the movie is actually set in London, and it's actually quite refreshing to see Bond back in England. He also takes a venture to Scotland towards the end, so the kind of homegrown elements of this movie, the recognisable settings, you know, I found it to be quite refreshing in a way, and I thought it was a very wise move on the part of the filmmakers to set it in Britain. And bring Bond home, so to speak. So the movie itself, to sum up, the script is brilliant. Not only is it a great pacey action movie, but it's very multi-layered and peppered with brilliantly rendered ideas that don't weigh it down. That's the thing. It's a really well-written script. The direction by Sam Mendes, he manages to focus on both the human elements of Bond and directs the action with aplomb. All the action scenes escalate and build, and largely practical effects. The action's brilliant. It looks stunning. Roger Deakins proves why he's one of the greatest cinematographers in the history of the medium. The film is absolutely gorgeous. Thomas Newman's score is fantastic. It manages to add another layer of character to the film, and he makes his own distinctly unique Bond theme, one of the best I've heard. So all in all, the film is fantastic. Javier Bardem is brilliant as the villain. His motives are clear. He's a very kind of charismatic presence in the film. Daniel Craig is consistently fantastic as Bond, and also you've got Judi Dench and Ralph Fiennes as the supporting cast. It's a fantastic film. Even non-fans of Bond will enjoy this movie. It's great. I can't recommend it enough. Skyfall, one of the best films of the year by far. I highly recommend it. And I would just seriously go check it out. Turn this off and go watch Skyfall.